Have you ever bought a car that wasn't quite what you thought it was, or gave you more trouble than you expected?
No, 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 no! Oh, that's my car! Oh, no!
Well, here are 4 cars that you should never buy. It wasn't until the 80s when Chevy started making cheaper alternatives to the Suburban and Blazer, and the same is still true today. If you don't want to spend 60 grand on a Suburban, you can spend about 30 grand on a Traverse and still get more or less the same thing. The first generation of the Traverse spans from the years about 2009 to 2012, and in the beginning it was actually pretty popular. However, there are some issues. For example, the 2010 model of the Traverse has received about 614 complaints. Some 300 of those are about the steering. To put some perspective on this, the average Chevy car during these years will get about 17 complaints per 10,000 sold. Now, the Traverse during these same years would get about 57 complaints per 10,000. That's more than 3 times the average. And every year looks like this for this first generation from 2009 to 2012. And it remains this way up until about 2013 when Chevy finally decided to do a facelift for the Traverse. Not only changing the body, but also apparently making some mechanical changes as well.
The 69 Chevelle Malibu Sport Coupe, $69 less than last year's Sport Coupe, equipped the same way.
In the late 60s, Chevy started making the Malibu as a submodel of the Chevelle. And like most sedans in the late 60s, it was a beast. In 2008, Chevy started making the 7th generation Malibu, which was intended to keep up more with Japanese brand cars with smaller engines and better gas mileage. However, this generation did quite terribly. According to the NHTSA, the Malibu got over 1,000 complaints just for the 2010 model, with about half of those being about electrical issues and the other half being about a plethora of other things. Going on with the average of 17 complaints per 10,000, the Malibu has received 38 complaints per 10,000, which is more than double the average. And like I said, every year is like this from 2008 to 2013. And none of it changes until 2014 when they finally decided to update the Malibu.
It's now my great pleasure to present to you the production version of the Chevrolet Volt.
In 2010, Chevy started making the Chevy Volt, one of its first electric cars, and in fact one of the first electric cars seen by one of the big 3 in the United States. The Volt offered a humble 35-mile range with just the battery, and up to 300 with the help of the generator. Despite being a big step for Chevrolet, the Volt didn't seem to be their best work. From 2011 to 2014, the Volt would get about 100 complaints per year. Now, 100 complaints may not seem like all that much compared to the 1,000 that the Malibu would get, but considering that Chevy sold 10 times less of the Volt than the Malibu, these few complaints actually make a really big difference. Again, going with our 17 per 10,000 complaint average, the Volt will get about 50 complaints per 10,000 every year. In fact, it peaked at 68 complaints per 10,000 in 2013. This is more than 3 times the average, and it actually doesn't really get all that better. Even though Chevy has managed to improve the Volt over the years, it's never actually seemed to be perfected, still having a relatively high number of complaints through all the years of its production, which in fact ended in 2019. In 2013, Chevy introduced the SS to the United States market. It had actually been sold outside of the US as the Holden Commodore for some time. It was basically the love child of the Cruze and the Corvette. But despite being an incredible car, the SS never seemed to do very well in the United States. During its 3 years on the market from 2014 to 2016, the SS would get about 15 complaints per 1,000 sold. If we're to put this against the backdrop of 10,000 like we have with the other cars, the SS would have received 150 complaints per 10,000. It's honestly a shame that it didn't do better. Like I had said before, the SS is a really cool car. It looks luxurious on the outside, it has a ton of power on the inside, but as we've seen, it never sold very well, and those who bought it never seemed to really like it. Well, there you have it. There are 4 cars that you should never buy from Chevy. If you agree, let me know in the comments. And if you like the video, be sure to subscribe.